manna, Mike. I'm not sure what you own, but this here is on the mark. Like a spiral from a 5-star recruit, we throwing darts, really focused. WD-40 couldn't stop the way we grinded. In the trenches, putting that work in, I relate to all my linemen. This is for the men, the boys do not belong here. Tiptoeing to the top, we doing cone drills. The hottest show in the world, you don't even gotta search. Steady putting in work, you see the sweat up on my shirt. They wasn't aware of us at first, we wasn't on their radar. Now every play that we make, they gon' say, oh, similar to a razor blade, we gon' stay sharp. The news ain't official if it's not on the mark.
What it do is Wednesday, the On Your Marc Show, powered and sponsored by Epic Sports Apparel, is back in the building. You know what it do, man. It's one of those times of year where we got to really, really dive into this, and I got my guy, Coach J, back in the building with us right here, Epic Sports Apparel CEO and also Coast to Coast Athletics. And listen, Prospect Sports on and popping as well. We just had a camp a couple of weeks ago, College Showcase, that went very well. But listen, June 1st kicked off camp season around the country. We're going to talk about that and more. And, Coach Jay is one of those guys that always puts out the unbelievable content that makes you think. And when I see these things, it always makes me think. And I kind of know what his message is, but I always like to get it, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But, it's one of those things where you have to pay attention to the things that you do when it comes to the exposure piece, to getting recruited. And, of course, Coach Jay's one of those guys in the industry with the recruiting blueprint, a common sense approach to recruiting. Listen, if you haven't got this is something you need to put in your books, something you need to put in your phone. You can get it on Amazon as well. You can get it at Barnes & Nobles. But I got my guy in the building. Coach, what's going on, man?
Man, always good, Mark, to be in the building with you, man. Always love, baby.
Already, man. Listen. Yes, sir, man. Well, listen, man, we know that June 1st kicked off camp season. A lot of the guys around the country are deep in it this week. Heavy rotation of that. But, when you put these things out, it always makes me wonder, where it's coming from. And I know where it's coming from, kind of, but I always like to get your unique perspective on these things. But, let's start with this. And this is one of those that got a lot of feedback. I'm sure you got a kind of phone calls and texts about it. But kids are posting, blessed to receive my first camp invite. And I think I know where you're coming from. And you just kind of wanted to know, to check the temperature on what, what's the genesis behind it. We see the blessed to get an offer, my 50th offer, my 30th offer, however many offers that the kids are getting. But the camp invite, talk about that and what that kind of, spoke to you from, and what your message was about with that one.
Yeah, Mark, it was never meant to be derogatory. It was more kind of wondering, does that help? Is it hurting? What was because of course, you and I are deep into it, so we see a lot of things that most people don't see, and a lot of it is almost clout chasing, right? Because and what I didn't say on that was, I asked the kid, was he going to the camp, and he was like, no sir. He had no intentions on even going to the camp. So then that made me further think, okay, well, is this something that, is going along the lines of the cloud chasing and, things like that. And, me, I'm always looking at solutions, right?
Right.
Where's the problem? And then, finding a solution. And I had never paid attention to the wording being, blessed to receive an invite to, I just hadn't paid attention to it, and it kind of caught me by surprise, like, wow, they're actually doing that now.
Right.
So it was really more just to see if that was, and then, and then I started looking more, and I kind of did a search, and I was like, wow, it's a lot of kids doing it. And I'm like, is this where we're headed with with recruiting, kids, obviously, he didn't have any offers. So maybe that was, his version of, saying, I'm, getting close to
That
getting
offer.
an offer or whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
for me, it was just, trying to figure out, is this something that is going to be normalized, and is it working? Because of course, I will never say I know everything when it comes to marketing and recruiting, but I do feel like some things are should be worded different, and pushed, because the biggest thing about camps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of people come on and say, don't you know don't be upset with the kid for posting it, and but on the back end of that, Mark, parents need to understand, if you're blessed to receive a camp invite, coaches from everywhere will send you exactly that, a camp invite and nothing else. So I think we have to be careful in, again, how we word it, because if you're overly, excited about it, then, what's next, especially if you're not even going, right?
Right.
And then we do know that there is a such thing as campers,
Right.
that coaches will flood your inbox just to get you to a camp, and with no intentions on ever offering you.
Right.
We know that exists,
Right. Right.
So for me, it's like, okay, do I want to put out this narrative, if it were my kid, to open the floodgates and say, hey, you know, do we want to be considered campers?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's just a lot of different, pieces to that. And I'm always wondering, what works and what don't.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you brought up a valid point towards the end. There's a difference between a real invite and just being a camper. And I think that, the overall, message there, and that's why I wanted to start with that, is because we're deep in the camp season now. And everybody wants to go to camp. But what's your reason for going? Make sure you have a strategy and a plan when you go to camp. You have to be strategic about this. And the last 2 weekends I've been at camps. Shout out to you, our athlete down in the H. We had a big one down there. We also had the Prep Reds on camp. Shout out to my guy Zach Collins, had the trenches for the trenches volume 2. So I've been knee deep in camps for about the last 2 or 3 weeks, and now we got the college camps going on. And the thing, or the most, the question I get the most is, how do we get exposure? How do we get noticed? And those things, you have to go into it. When it's a combine setting, and coach, and I know you know this as well. There's a reason that the guys, when they prepare for the NFL combine, go through this and practice this strategically for 6 to 8 weeks, or a couple of months. They want to make these times or their best performances at that particular time. You can't just go out there and wing it. You have to have a real plan, something that you want to do special. Something has to be special about you to stick out amongst thousands and thousands of campers, thousands and thousands of kids that these coaches will see in the next week. I mean, we're talking about, since Sunday, Coach, and you know this, it's probably been 30,000 kids at these camps in 2 days. So what do you do special? What sticks out about you? And have a plan when you go to these camps. And I think, with that particular post, and Coach, this is the reason that you do this and you stick out like a sore thumb, is you want to challenge the mindset, the mental makeup of the parents and the players when they go out to these things. And that's one reason I wanted to have you on today, since we're knee deep in it. That's going to challenge you intellectually to think, what am I posting this for? Does it mean something, or am I just, posting it so that, you can get clicks and likes and things like that? And I think that was the message you were trying to send.
Absolutely. And to hone in on what you just said, as far as having a plan, we discuss that all the time. And of course, we've been seeing this for years, where we're at a camp. I can tell by how a kid is warming up if he's going to have a good camp.
Right.
Automatically, I can tell
Yep.
Just from the movement part, his eye contact, just the swag or no swag, I can tell immediately if they're going to have, a really good camp or they're just there. Parents, you have to understand, you do not, and I got to repeat this a million times, you do not go to a college camp to get exposure. You go to a college camp to get one, the main purpose is to get an offer. Right. If you don't get that, it is to build a relationship that you can parlay on Friday night when you leave to get that offer. But you don't go there not knowing anything about what you're going to be doing. Meaning, if you have not practiced the 5-10-5, if you can't, as a skill guy, broad jump 9-5 or beyond, if you haven't practiced your stance and start for running a 40, don't do it. You don't go there to practice any of those things, because whatever hits the paper sticks.
Absolutely.
Simple as that.
It's written in stone that it's going to follow you.
It's going to follow you. Right. So, and that's where you become what we just said, a camper, because coaches know you're not serious about being recruited, but they'll get you out there to camp. Absolutely. All day, every day. Which is why there are always 500 to 600 kids at a camp, and maybe 20 of them get offered. Because when you think about it, it's a numbers game, and that's just the truth of the matter, right? They want to get as many people in there as possible, but they're already specific about who they're evaluating. And then you have some guys that just show up and jump off the page and get recruited in that regard. But the majority of everybody else is basically there to camp.
Absolutely. You got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy about it. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to have a plan, like we said. And when you go to the college camps, like Coach said, it's about getting it offer. It's about developing in that relationship. You want to stick out like a sore thumb so that they can say, hey, this is a guy we need to move up our board. This is a guy we need to get in our, in the office and talk to him, sit down with his parents and come up with a plan. And he fits what we need to do. When you go to these schools, do you fit in their particular scheme? Are you an edge guy that fits into a 4-3 scheme, or are they playing a 3-4? You a nose that's head up on the center. You're a zero technique. You got to know those things when you go to these camps at these colleges. Were you invited? Those are all the type of things that you need to know when you go in there. Or you just like Coach said, you're a camper. You know what I mean? You're a numbers guy. A guy that they want to, especially for the younger guys that haven't been, on these guys' radar yet. It's one of those things where you're just there to kind of, feed into the atmosphere. You might get a chance to talk to the coaches. You may not. You may not get a chance to tour the campus or whatever. Those things go into this thing. So, and that's the biggest thing that you have to know when you go into this.
That's extremely, extremely important, Mark. And we discuss a lot of that in the blueprint. But the guys that I consult, we go deeper. I mean, we dig all the way into the breakdown of why it's important, because not everybody is a Landon Callis. Not everybody is a Booby Feaster where you're going to walk out and run a blazing fast time, broad jump 10 feet plus, and just look great doing everything. Not everyone can do that. So if you're not that athletic, you better have a plan. And those are things that I've had a lot of success with, guys giving them a plan of how to attack the camper. And parents, you got to look at it like this. Again, if you go to a camp and say it's 400 kids there, and I'll say, and I mean just one school, and I'll say including GAs and some of the coaching staff, I'll say 40 coaches, Mark, 40 coaches there. And we know that's a whole lot of coaches, and it's probably nowhere close to that. 400 kids, 40 coaches. Explain to me how 40 coaches are going to effectively evaluate 400 kids in 2 to 3 hours. How is that possible?
Right. I mean, that's the big misnomer, and that's the big thing. We see this happen year after year. The cream is gonna rise to the top. If you have the measurables, that's one thing that gets you in the door. You can go online. The coaches printed this. We've posted this in the College and Recruiting Facebook page. Look at your position. Look at what fits that particular position. What positions they recruit. Look at the measurables that they recruit for that particular college at that particular position. They already have these things lined out. So when you go into it, if you fit that mold, then hey, by all means, get there and show out and do what you need to do. Especially if they invited you personally, go and do what you need to. They want to see you on campus. They want to see you in their face, and they want to put you through workouts that they designed specifically. So, with that being said, Coach, that's exactly the message that we want to send, each week right here on Your Marc Show. We talk about those things, and we've talked about these things in the past, Coach and myself.
Absolutely. And here's the biggest thing, we talking Power 4, Mark.
Yes, sir.
With the 105, being in place, and I'm pretty sure that rule is going to stick. It should be coming up law here very soon, before the end of June. Once that 105 is solidified by Congress, and those guys are, everybody's paid across the board, high school guys definitely need to understand that if you aren't extremely close to being fully developed, your sophomore, junior year, going to these camps, look the part, be the part, they are going to go to the portal unless you are a 4-star or 5-star, and I'm talking specifically P4. They will go in the portal because, again, it's money, right? Am I going to pay a guy that needs a whole lot of development coming out of high school versus a top end guy, which is a, highly touted, 4-star, 5-star, Landon Callis, booby type guy? Will we pay them to come in and develop versus going to grab a pick and play guy out of the portal? So they're going to more than likely go with your top end, guys that have shown and proven that they're fully developed and they can come in and almost be a true freshman out the gate. So parents really got to look at that when, you're going to these camps. Where is your kid mentally, physically, and then what does that window look like? If I'm a freshman, can I get the relationship and then transform my body within a year so when I go back, they see something totally different? So again, it's a scripted, almost, you have to figure out from year to year where you are. And that window is very short when we talking Power 4. That recruiting window in high school is extremely short unless, you're a senior and you just do some amazing things your senior year. And they just, come and say, hey, we hadn't even saw you before. You blew up. Other than that, you got to have a plan and then be able to change directions immediately if that plan isn't getting you the results that you want.
Absolutely. I mean, the plan, the mission should be, when you go to a college campus to get that offer. And if they invited you, you got to show up and prove, that you can back up what they saw on film. It's threefold. It's film, it's what you do in person, and then that relationship that you have with those guys. And also measurables count as well. And then today's day and age, where you go to high school, I think matters as well, too. Because
I completely agree with you. Real estate matters, because certain schools are known for putting out certain type of players. So colleges are going to go there. Now, again, if you show up to a camp and you do all the right things, and there are a lot of kids right now that's going to the camps and putting up great numbers and still not getting offered. So it's still no guarantee, because you just the way recruiting works now at the highest level is really tricky right now, because they're still trying to figure out what this pay scale is going to look like, who they're going to pay, and then how many guys they're going to get out of high school from the class of 26 and 27. So it's tough. So you have to, really hit the circuit and hit it hard.
Absolutely. I think, for the 26 guys, most of these guys are about to come off the board now and commit, probably between now and July 4th, before the season starts. The 27s, it's not too late. 27s, they got some guys that they already are really high on, but it's still time for you guys to keep making up ground and keep doing it. June 15th, I think that they'll start to really call and get in touch with the 27s directly. So it's not over for you guys. You guys is grinding, man. Keep grinding, doing what you're doing. It's not over. But you do have to be steadfast, and like Coach said, you have to be thorough and really, really hone into what it takes to get there. Now, Coach, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because I think this one is really, really – that was a great one, but this one really caught some traction too. Coaches do not create D1 athletes. Parents do. And I think I know where you were going with this one. This was a big one that got a lot of traction last week or over the weekend as well. Talk about your mindset and explain kind of what this post was about.
Well, so I have been seeing it a lot circulating, and it was, for me, wondering, okay, where's the truth to that, right? Or is it true? And of course, a lot of people feel like, there is a lot of truth to it. So I actually really did some digging and research to kind of put the argument, give it a let's argue with facts, right? Mm-hmm. And see more of what that's about. And I think if we're talking from a and again, I might be going down a rabbit hole, but if we're talking about from a pure standpoint, right, the creation obviously comes from God, and then through the parents, the genetics is a huge part. And again, I'm talking Power 4 right now. Genetics plays a huge part, because there are some situations where I don't care how much you work, if the genetics aren't there for the highest level, you're not going to get there, right? And this is just something that we've seen, over and over and over the years, because just genetics you can only do so much, right? You can only train so much. But if the explosion, if the things that the highest level isn't looking for, then you're probably going to be playing at a lower level. And, it is what it is. But I think from that standpoint, parents birth the athletes, nurture them, and then the coach adds a lot of it too. But we can always argue, what about kids that didn't have the parents, that didn't do, a lot of things for them, that didn't, promote or take them? And then on the other side of that, what about the kids that, didn't have the coaching that the parents, so again, it's a unique argument. And I think for me, where I come from, it takes a village, right, to create anything sustainable, even, athletes. Somebody, more than one person is going to play a part. Now, you may have one person that's going to do, a lot more, but I believe, in my heart, that if the parent is, doing everything as far as the marketing and building that kid and making sure that they're eating right and all of those. I'm gonna go with the parent first as far as the creation part, and then the coach plays a huge part in that as well, because again, the coach is only there for a short window. Coach is there 2 to 4 years, depending on whether they're in middle school, high school, whatever, collegiately, still very short window. So by the time a kid has gotten to, you can't tell me high school created Landon Callis or Booby Feast. You can't tell me that.
No, hey, listen. Those guys were blessed genetically as well. You mentioned 2 of the top recruits in the country, in the 26 and 27 class. Some of that was wake up out of the bed, but those guys also have the work ethic to go behind it.
There you go. There you go. So, and that's why I say it's a cool. It takes a village. It's a whole lot of things. And then, like I said, I'm an outside of the box thinker, Mark.
Right.
What about kids? Me growing up, I was a D1 athlete.
Right.
D1 skill set. And my parents didn't go to any of my games. They was like, if you want to play football or whatever sport, we'll sign you up, find your way there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it was the village, that honed me and helped me in probably a lot of situations like that. So again, for, one argument, there's another outlier that kind of, goes with that. So I'm going to always go back to the creation starts from genetics.
Right.
And, parent nurturing.
Right.
And then everybody else comes into play.
Well, I also think if they're raised in a competitive environment, that helps as well.
Absolutely.
I think in our time, back athletic, and shout out to my guy Coach Steve Brown tuning in. We talked about this a little bit off camera last week. What you did outside of that. I mean, you had throw up, tackle, kill the man, all of these type of things. That's where that skill set was developed. But before the refined coaching, playing outside, hooping all day, playing stickball, things like that. You developed those intricate traits, and then from where I came up, my cousins had us in the alley. You know what I'm saying? And we couldn't run outside there. We had to run in between them, and if we ran, we got talked about. So I think what I'm saying is that that competitive nature is developed as well, and that teaches you how to compete when you get into a structured environment when it comes to sports. You already have that intricately developed. You know what I mean? Like, I knew that if I didn't ball with them, then I couldn't come outside. You know what I mean? I couldn't ball in my neighborhood if I didn't ball in. This is not before we even got to school ball. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And then that was something that we had to do intrinsically, and I think that some of that, is not developed at an early age now because of the outside, distractions with the phones and the videos and, the game systems and things like that, which we introduced as a society. So I think that goes all into it, and it's just an observation of things because we're in that,
which helps the argument of the village, right? Because your cousins, were, in fact, they're helping nurture and create the beast that you became early.
Right, early.
It wasn't the coaches in Little League. It was you were outside playing, and your family, just like mine, my family in the neighborhood was like, hey, you finna come over here and you gonna sit there until you can get on the court.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, ain't no I got next, so you got to get on there and play.
No,
and if you can't play, they're gonna kick you off.
Absolutely. So it goes back to the argument of I think coaches have a huge part in it, but not the end all be all.
Right. And I think that's why, that statement was so profound to me is they don't create it. There has to be some, like you said, the village, whether it's that uncle, that aunt, that your godfather, that grandmother, somebody, affects that mindset when it comes to that competitive nature of the athlete. And then sometimes it's just born within. You see some athletes that just have it. It's just in them.
It's just in them.
It's just in them.
And that's the argument of, a kid that didn't have the parental support that just said, you know what, I'm going to do it in spite of everything.
Right.
There's a guy in Africa right now that's on, blowing up on YouTube out there, having somebody video him in the rain with a basketball and, really coaching himself, putting in work. And I think he just got a shot to come and, try out for the NBA from, one of the guys that played. His story is, putting in work, self-driven, seems like, again, this is just outside looking in, but I don't see a coach there, coaching him on film. He just got somebody filming him, and he's doing drill after drill after drill, creating different kind of weight systems and, things like that. So there are always going to be situations where the norm isn't there and an athlete, male or female, still prevailed. But it's still, to me, you still got to have somebody to give you an opportunity to do what you do. So it's still a part of the village. No, I don't believe anybody is self-made. Somebody got to give you an assist, an alley-oop at some point.
Absolutely. I agree totally. It's somewhere, somehow, somebody has to make, it's just like you have to be shown how to tie a shoe. You have to be shown how to ride a bike. You have to be shown how to prepare, a meal. There's somewhere, somehow, where you're molded or shaped and pointed in the right direction to get where you're going. It like you said, the village. And we talk about these things all the time. And, we go way back, to the first time we met. I met you covering Boogie. You know what I mean? And since then, it's been one of those things where we've just carried on and kind of molded what we do together, to work to help athletes, players, and parents to get where they need to be based on what we do. But it just takes that particular instant. And today, with the power of social media, it's almost a click away. And that's the start of it. You know what I mean? It's like I was telling, shout out to Prep Red Zone this week. Prep Red Zone is the beginning of the exposure for those kids, especially at the middle school level.
Absolutely.
Both of those kids that we talked about today came through Prep Red Zone camps and combines. But that's just the beginning of the exposure. It's not the end all. You know what I mean? Coming to a prospect sports camp, the collegiate camp, a lot of those kids and the flex zone. They started to blow after that exposure piece that, prospects and flex zone brought together. Since the first flex zone camp, a lot of those kids are playing on Saturdays now. It's the beginning of it.
And a couple of them are playing in the league.
Absolutely.
So, from the one from years ago. Yes.
Right. The very first one.
Yeah, the very first one.
Right.
Yep. We got guys that are, doing some amazing things. And the beauty of that, Mark, is, the kids came in with the mindset of taking advantage of the opportunity.
Right.
And that is important, and we, a lot of times, parents get caught up in, what the name of the camp is and who's there and, who's not going to be there. And, my mindset is always reps. You know what I'm saying? Like, can we get reps? And there's something to learn from every situation, whether it's, good reps, bad reps, you got to learn, because it's never going to be scripted how you want when you get to college. Right. So you have to learn to deal with the good, the bad, as many problem-solving skills you can learn as a kid that's going to help you when you get to college. I think if you don't have a plethora of different experiences in life, when you get to college, it is extremely hard to adjust. And I think that's where a lot of kids fail, because they're only regimented to do very few things. And when life throws curveballs at you, it's like, how do I deal with this? How do I figure this out? Right? But if you have a kid that's been all over the country that done seen, the good camps, the bad camps, the big games, the little game, they're used to it, to that stage when they get there, and it's like, I've seen this before. Okay, I know, okay, this is a low time right now. This is I'm going through the storm right now. Been there before. Let me figure out how to maneuver versus, shutting down and jumping in the transfer portal. And then you don't have nowhere to go.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Well, I think that's what we hit a home run today, Coach. I mean, I don't know how more I can be excited about the message today. And guys, listen, if you're not following College Recruiting 101 on Facebook, shout out to Candace Taylor Nichols, man. I'm looking at the Facebook page and it says 76 members. There's no way that only these 76 people are getting this information. She's putting out information that's specifically not just about college scholarships, but just going to college, period. Free tuition for Texas families and things like that. And, Coach J and myself and a couple more people have been working to put this message out. But, people always want to know what the sauce is or what the reasoning is or how to get the exposure, how to get recruited. It's in the blueprint right here. We're giving it to you on a weekly basis. And they're putting this kind of content out every week. So, I mean, if you're not following College Recruiting 101 on Facebook, man, you need to go ahead.
You definitely should. And, Mark, let me say this before we finish up.
Yeah.
Parents, and I need you parents to understand this. We can pay for things that are comfortable, right? We can say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. But understand that whatever you're paying for when it comes to recruiting, you are leveraging your kid's future on what you don't know. You're trusting, your kid's future to someone that knows more than you. So you should look at it like it's a medical practice, like it's your car. You're taking your car and it gets fixed. You want to know as much information as you can because changes come all the time. So if you're not on top of it, you could end up on the wrong side of it.
Absolutely. You got to invest now for later. It's no thing when you buy a car, or you buy a house. That's your investment. You put everything into it. Now, if you want to invest in this athlete, you got to start early. The training, the like he said, the circle of people that you have, your athlete exposed to matters when it comes to recruiting. It's just not about getting the offer. You have to build it up to get the offer. You know what I mean? It's your resume, so to speak, and that's what Coach is saying there.
No, absolutely, Mark. And the earlier, the better. But it's certain things early. You don't want to do everything, but there is a plan. So that's again where the blueprint comes in. And guys, you can go to Mark's page. You can go to the college page. You can come to my page, which is SD Johnson on Facebook. You can DM me directly if you want to get a copy of it today. You can, send me the money. I'll send you a copy. But if you want a hard copy, then you have to order that online. But that's what it's all about. And guys, don't look at, one or two or three camps saying, I'm having a camp season. No, you're not. If you're not out there hitting 8 or 9, 10 camps, it's a numbers thing, because again, you don't know if you're going to be seen at any camp that you go to. So the more camps you go to, it improves your chances on being seen. And if you want to go deeper into wanting to make sure you're going to be seen, DM me or Mark.
Absolutely, man. Well, listen, Coach, I appreciate you giving me a small little time. Of course, he's always a part of this show. You guys might not see him all the time, but he's always working, man, with myself. Shout out to Nelly and everybody down at Prospect Sports as well. Jack and you guys have been doing a bang-up job this spring. Listen, also, before we get out of here, I want to shout out to my guy, Armando Rodriguez, and his pops with the nice shirt. Waco University, one of those high schools down in Waco that I'll be probably getting on the field with this fall. Shout out to him, man. Listen, in the building, man. Shout out to my guy. He's working hard. One of those guys, listen, his dad is doing it the right way. doing it the right way, Coach. And they understand what this is, what the process is. And he's a 2028. And before he graduates, he's going to get that offer. So, shout out to Armando and his dad, Rodriguez, down at Waco University for the fit. But that's all we got for you today from myself, Coach J, the On Your Marc Show, powered and sponsored by Epic Sports Apparel. Go to onyourmarcsports.com and check out the recent posts and things like that. And, man, listen, this has been a great one here from the Fishbowl Radio Network, and we'll be back at you Wednesday. My guy, Manor Mike's going to take us out. We out.
Hey, this Manor Mike. I'm not sure what you on, but this here is on the mark. Like a spiral from a 5-star recruit, we throwing darts, really focused. WD-40 couldn't stop the way we grinded. In the trenches, putting that work in, I relate to all my linemen. This is for the men, the boys do not belong here. Tiptoeing to the top, we doing cone drills. The hottest show in the world, you don't even gotta search. Steady putting in work, you see the sweat up on my shirt. They wasn't aware of us at first, we wasn't on their radar. Now every play that we make, they gon' say, similar to a razor blade, we gon' stay sharp. The news ain't official if it's not on the mark.